Okay, hey guys, in this video we're going over my acquisition blueprint, which is all 50 steps that it takes in order to actually get a commercial real estate deal across the finish line. There's actually 3 phases to this. One is called discovery and underwriting, under contract, and then closing and ownership, what it's like when you get on the other side of actually purchasing. In this video today though, we're only gonna go over the first phase, which like I said is discovery and underwriting, and focusing on if a property is actually viable. Does it even make sense or not to pursue a deal, okay? So let's just dive on into this. The first one here, I'm gonna go, like I said, I'm gonna go through, there's 18 steps, and don't get overwhelmed by that because a couple of them are just kind of box checking. But I wanna make sure that we go through all this so you, wherever you're at, whether it's residential or hopefully eventually commercial, you know exactly what steps that you need to take in order to actually succeed in commercial real estate, okay? The first one is receive a deal from your broker. A lot of people have the same question. It's how do you receive a deal from a broker if you don't even have a broker, right? So let me tell you the easiest way for you to go and find that right broker teammate to help you send you great deals. I love to work off of referrals. Anytime you cold call anybody, your percentage of working with that guy or gal is extremely small. It's a very rare occurrence where a random cold call actually turns into a great relationship. I love to work off of referrals. So what I recommend doing, whatever city that you're in, I guarantee you in this next 7 days, there's going to be some type of residential or even commercial, but real estate meetup. A bunch of brokers and investors all going to get together, drink some wine and some beers, hear somebody talk, and then network. You need to go to one of these events, get outside your comfort zone. Even if you're more of an introvert, this is the time. If you want to be in real estate, you got to get outside and start to mingle with people. But sit down and just introduce yourself. Ask questions about what business people are in, how they got themselves into real estate, things like that. Eventually, they're going to, come back and ask you what you're into, what you like to do. And at that moment, you say, look, you're probably, most of the guys, 95% of them are residential. Say, hey, I see that you're in residential. I'm in more in the commercial real estate. Who's the best? This is what you ask. Who's the best commercial broker in your office or in your brokerage? And they're going to say, oh man, you got to meet John. John's awesome. He's been doing it for 30 years, this, that, and whatever. And then you say, well, that's awesome. Would you mind sending an introduction text right now to John and I? Here's my cell. Then what that does, think about this. Now you are a referred lead to that experienced broker, more likely the most experienced guy in their office, and you got an introduction from another experienced or maybe another local broker. So now you are in, getting a chance to, hey, John, it's great to meet you. I'm Nolan or whoever. I'm free on Thursday morning. Can I buy you a cup of coffee? Guy's gonna be like, awesome. Because again, now you're a referred lead from somebody in his office. So now you have a referred lead from the experienced guy and you are a referred lead. So now both parties have an optimistic reasoning to get together. You go get coffee with them, you ask a bunch of questions, just validating questions, really saying, hey, John, how did you get into the business? I like to spend especially if I'm sitting down for 45 minutes, I like to spend the first 30 minutes talking only about the broker. I want to learn more about him, his experience, where he was born and raised. I want to ask about his kids, his family. Are his kids in middle school or high school? Are they going to college? Like just understanding that I want that broker to realize that I care about him as a person. I want to get to know him on more of a deeper level than just transacting real estate, okay? So once he understands that you're here to play and you're here to stay for a little bit, he's going to ask you a couple of questions about yourself. Hey, how long you been in real estate? Oh, what makes you want to buy this property or that or whatever? And I always like to say this little phrase. And this is number 2 here, you want to confirm the physical attributes of the building. Now, I have 5 physical attributes that I focus on. 10 to 40,000 square feet, 16-foot clear heights, multiple roll-up doors, less than a mile off the highway, and if there's a lease, it needs to have at least 3 years left on a triple net lease, okay? Those 5 attributes physically about a property. So I mentioned that to that broker. I say all those physical attributes with oozing confidence. I come across like, hey, this is what I want and I'm not deviating away from. This is what I purchase or my group and I purchase. And then at that moment, he's going to say, Nolan, sorry, man, I don't have anything like that on my pipeline right now. And most people would say, oh, shucks, bummer. This is what I want you to say. No problem, John. What do you got? And you slow back down. Because what he's going to do now is he's going to start thinking creatively and a little outside of his bucket and say, well, You know, I don't have something that's 40,000 feet. I do have something that's 7,500 feet that's got 2 roll-up doors and it's less than a mile off the highway. He might just have a property that's just missing one of your physical attributes, but it's got the other 4. So that's when you mentioned, that's awesome, John. I'm actually around tomorrow afternoon at 4 p.m. or whatever the time that you have available. Are you around for us to go walk this site and just put it right in front of him? And he's going to see this audacious tenacity. That's the best way I can describe it. Some guy that wants to get after it and go for it and figure out a way in order to buy a piece of real estate. Brokers love that. They love that aggressive, just go get mentality, because those are the types of people those guys are. They're in sales. The only way they put food on the table is by selling or leasing something. So they love to work with partners or buyers like yourself that are very, very in similar personality, okay? So those are the first 2 that I would focus on. Perceiving or making sure that you got the physical must-have metrics. Number 3, walk that property with your broker, take photos, meet the owner. One moment about this, you have some people out there on the forums that say, oh, you know, my broker doesn't want me to meet the owner. If the broker knows anything about real estate, he wants you as the buyer to meet the owner of the property, because when you have both parties working in the same direction versus against each other, he has a much higher likelihood of that deal actually being closed. A lot of people don't think about this. They always think, oh, it's the seller versus the buyer. That's not the way it is at all. It's actually in the buyer and the seller versus Uncle Sam. The government's the bad guy in this transaction. We're trying to reduce those capital gains down to 0 if possible. And if a good broker, like I said, if he's an experienced guy that you got introduced to, he will understand that and actually probably recommend that you speak with the owner as well, especially if you come across as seasoned and confident in your initial coffee, okay? After that, discover the seller's true motivation. Do we have a death, a divorce, a dissolution, or disaster? Why is this guy wanting to sell this property, right? I had a broker friend of mine tell me that there's 3 things that make a really great deal. You've got something wrong with the property, you've got a timeline, and you've got a reason for this guy to get out. He's got to figure, like, let's say this guy's moving to San Francisco and he's got to sell within 30 days because he's getting a new job. That's motivation right there. He's got to move on that deal, or he's got to move quickly. And so you have an opportunity because he's so motivated in order to get a really good deal. So figuring out, number 5, is why is this guy wanting to sell? Number 5, you're underwriting the deal. You're going to reverse engineer yourself into what I call my financial must-have metrics, okay? After you have discovered the physical attributes of the property, like I mentioned before, we have a few of these things that we focus on that are must-haves. We got to have them or we're walking away. You have to have at least a 10% cap rate, at least a 1.4 debt service coverage ratio, and at least a 10% cash on cash return. That's a global of 8 total attributes of a property in order for that thing to be viable for you to actually go continuing to move forward. Even if you're missing one, and let me give you a quick example. The reason why we focus so hard on those physical attributes of that property is because there's about 1.2 million businesses in the United States, small businesses that have gross revenue between $2 and $10 million, okay, in this little span. You've got plenty of businesses that make less than $2 million, and you've got a smaller amount of businesses that make more than $10 million. This is the largest pool in the United States of small business. The reason why, so what I did some homework once, and I said, of the largest pool, the largest ownership and tenancy pool in the United States, what types of properties are these guys owning and using and leasing? And it was those 5 attributes: 10 to 40,000 square feet, multiple roll-up doors, 16-foot clear heights, less than a mile off the highway. Those attributes are the most popular style of real estate in the United States for small business. So that's why we're so specific on that. So then, like I said, that's when I start to focus and work backward. And when I find that physical building, that's when I want to start working towards making an offer based upon my financial must-haves, okay? After that, I'm going to draft a letter of intent, or an LOI. It's got to have these terms on it. It's going to have due diligence period of 45 days, 30 days after due diligence to close. Earnest money is 1% of the purchase price. And, if your broker has any other contingencies that he'd like to include, depending upon if it's vacant, to lease the space, or contingent on financing and inspection and things like that that are usually a part of a lot of real estate transactions. Okay, next, you're going to have your broker submit that letter of intent to the seller. It's very simple from here. It's literally, by the way, a letter of intent and an LOI they are non-binding. It's kind of a feeler out. It's just you're asking the seller if they have any desire to move forward. It's like, hey, here's outlining from 30,000 feet the terms of this deal. I'm going to offer this to you non-binding, but now we're on the same page and agreeing on our terms. Once the seller agrees to those terms, that's when we actually start spending some time drafting up a purchase agreement and going hard with, going forward, depositing earnest money into a title company or closing attorney's office and actually beginning the due diligence process. So no, letters of intent or LOIs are not binding, but they do begin to set the tone for the deal, okay? Number 9, the seller agrees to your LOI, which is awesome. That means you're like about a fifth of the way there, which is great. After that, this is number 10, email your insurance agent with all the property information from the insurance email template, which I have on that. If you download this, it's going to be in the bio of this video. You can download this thing for free. It's got a link, a hyperlink that you can click here, and it'll just auto-populate the actual insurance template. But what it does is it gives as much information about the property as possible. When it was built, how old the HVAC is, do they know the age of the roof, the type of tenant, how big is the acreage, just questions about the property. The more information that you can get to the insurance agent that he has to do his due diligence, more likely than not, the lower and smaller the premium is going to be, okay? After that, I want to interview a real estate attorney, request attorney's recommendations from brokers. This is another big important piece that I say always focus on working off of referrals. I never do cold calls. I never want to cold call an accounting firm or a cold call a brokerage or a law firm, because I don't have any clue who is good at what they do. I want to talk to somebody that's had a good experience with some person, and I say, give me that guy's information, I'm going to call him. Because I trust the person that gave me that information, therefore I'm already going to give that lawyer or that accountant the benefit of the doubt, okay? And then next what I'm going to do is I'm going to start interviewing commercial bankers. Request bankers' recommendations from brokers. Remember, if this broker has been in the business for 30 years and he's transacted a lot of deals, I guarantee you that not every single one of those deals have shown up with just cash. Right? There's always going to be, more likely than not, a bank involved. Whether it's a big deal or a small deal, usually somebody's lending money. And this banker probably has some really strong banking partnerships because, again, the more likely that he is to set everything up in the first, then he has a higher likelihood of him getting paid if he has all of these teammates already in position on the chessboard. So what you want to do, again, is ask for a referral or a recommendation for a banker from the broker that has all the experience, okay? So that's number 12. 13, you want to go sit down with those bankers that he recommended and begin discovering their lending appetite. Loan to value, amortization, their capacity to lend, do they do interest only, etc. All these types of things and nuances that a bank is willing to do. Now think about this. Most people, when they go to a bank, they always think of like a large publicly traded, Chase, Manhattan, Wells Fargo, Regions Bank, those big banks that are on television. I have discovered, I have 12 of these buildings now, I don't have one loan with the Fortune 500 bank. Every one of my loans are with local banks that have usually less than $2 billion in assets. And the main reason why that is because local banks usually only have 1 or 2 members on their loan committee that actually make decisions on if they can lend you money or not. And they also know the local market so much more than a big conglomerate bank does. And you can really build a relationship because like some of the deals that require creativity, which is all we talk about on this channel and the way that I do deals, it usually requires an open-minded, creative banker to go along and see my vision for a deal or a transaction on a site. And it's going to allow him to us be partners, because if I say, hey, this is what I'm going to do, and then I do what I say I'm going to do, that's just going to open the floodgates for more money down the road. So always interviewing the banker, and it's very similar to how you interviewed the broker. If you sit down for 45 minutes, you want to spend the first 30 minutes talking only about the banker, his family, where he grew up, how he got in the banking business, all of these things about the banker. Make it about him because you're trying to build a relationship. You don't want to be transactional. That's the biggest key. Okay, next what you want to do is retain an attorney. Like I said, get another recommendation from most of the time the bankers are pretty good at it too, but of course also your broker. They usually have some type of guy. You don't want to just call up a divorce attorney when you need someone to draft up an LLC document, right? Like you got to make sure you have a real estate attorney that knows exactly what they're doing, okay? So retain this guy. It's not going to be crazy expensive, but it's not going to be cheap. You're probably looking at anywhere from $2,500 to $5,000 to retain this guy. It's not going to cost that much over the long term because within that $5,000, you're talking about being able to transact like 4 to 5 different deals, which if you think about it, you do $1 million building, you put up $5,000 to buy $5 million worth of real estate. Not a bad deal. Okay, after that, the broker emails the purchase agreement to the attorney for review. This is a big piece right here that's important because you don't want to just go into this blind. You want to have a professional review this to make sure there's no, in section 63I-E, there's something in there saying that, the buyer agrees to pay the seller $10,000 a year for Auburn, Alabama Iron Bowl tickets. That actually happened to my father-in-law once, believe it or not. And they had to keep going back and forth because he kept putting it in there. So what I'm getting at is have your attorney review that purchase agreement before you actually sign on the dotted line because that one does go hard. It's not an LOI, it's a real legally binding document. After that, your attorney reviews the purchase agreement, your attorney approves that purchase agreement, and you submit that to the seller to sign, and then the purchase agreement is signed and you are under contract. Now, that is the first phase of our acquisition blueprint. Again, that was 18 different steps. There's 50 of these things in total. And like I said, if you want this, look in the bio of this episode or this video, and there's a link to it. We'll give it to you for free. This is phase 1. There's 2 more phases after that, and I'm going to show you on my computer exactly how we're going to get there. See you on the next video.